Sorry for being a little bit late. Sometimes the one course after another thing really affects me, and my voice is starting to give out on me for some reason. So I wanted to go get something to drink. So I'm going to do my best. I may be coughing up a storm, but I'm going to do my best today. So we're talking about an interesting topic to me, but it can be a little bit dry. But I'm really going to count on feedback from y'all, so please, I'll be monitoring the chat. I can see it. What I write on the board will not be important. I will be saying everything out loud that I write on the board. It is just more of a comfort thing for me to have it there. All right? You don't have to worry about taking notes or maintaining it. But today we're going to talk about session states. All right? So I want everybody to do something for me if you get the chance. If you can pull out your phones. I don't know the exact way, but if you can open up your phone, then open up your news app. All right, if you have a news app on your phone. For iPhone, it's swipe left, and if you haven't changed your widgets, there ought to be some, is today Earth Day? Oh. There ought to be some widgets there for like top stories or whatever. You already got it? Awesome, very good. I'm going to give you a second to get there. I'm going to show you two technologies on my iPhone, two apps, whatever it are. And that's an illustration on what the difference is between these two. So I'm going to select the top story. And the title is Biden to Urge Climate Action at World Leaders Summit. The publishing entity is Wall Street Journal. And there's one thing of note on this app, and I'll try to show it. I don't know if it's going to come through as clear at all on the thing here. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see something that says either next story or the right arrow, right? Now on mine, the left arrow is grayed out. There's no right story. So I'm going to hit the right story. And it says from Reuters, India posts world record COVID cases with oxygen running out. Now at this point, the previous story or the back button has now become active, and the next button remains. And the next button, it immediately scrolls over. Ex-NFL turned Army Ranger on LeBron James's anti-cop tweet. Next. Immediate Chauvin verdict, a blow to ex-police trio awaiting trial over George Floyd death. Next, exclusive Texas Energy finds shut. Now, as each time I hit next, one of the things I want you to notice is the immediacy of the scroll. You'll also notice that I am connected to Southeastern Wi-Fi. Good hint that there's not a lot of communication going on if it was immediate, right? Because it gets a little bit slow around this time of day. Now, if I go back, it will go appropriately. Chauvin verdict, ex-NFL player, India post-world record COVID cases, Biden to urge climate. Biden was where we started. The previous story is grayed out. The next story remains. If I swipe up, go to my selection, and then go up, killing the app, I go back to my news app. This is one I actually want to read. All right, so I go back to my news app, I open up, the story that gets shown is Black Bear Review. Aubrey Plaza hits career high in ingenious meta movie. All right, that's actually a story I'd want to read. Aubrey Plaza is hilarious in Parks and Rec. Next story is still active, previous story is gone. You'll notice the second I close my app, the previous stories went poof, went away, and it started the entire process all over again. That's my first example. The next example I'm going to show you, I'm not going to be able to give y'all examples to, so we're going to have to look kind of forward a little bit. I play a game. I used to actually have a very big following on this game called Injustice 2 Mobile. I don't recommend anybody play this game. It's end of cycle. It's been around for 3 years. Don't play it or anything. Oh, and it also wastes your life, right? So anyway, in this game, every account has certain things associated with it, including a list of cards or characters that you can play with. And when I select one, there's individual characteristics for each one of these as we upgrade the players that we can play with. So this is the character dark side, and it has all of these different options on it. These are all associated with the account. In addition to that, on the top, it lists a set of resources that are associated with the account. Things like credits, gear material, reforges, stuff like that. If I make a transaction in this game, like right now, I'm going to I'm going to upgrade one of the abilities of this particular character. I'm going to spend 42,000 credits, hit there, chug, done. It took longer. And in fact, some of these transactions, think. Think, done. Think, done. The amount of time associated with each transaction. Now here's something about it though. It takes forever, but if I swipe up and kill this app, Darkside's Parademon Summon, whatever as you call it, I forget, action, whatever, is going to remain upgraded. It's not going to restart where I was. These two ways of storing information are what we're going to talk about right now. If you were Apple and you had a news app that was very popular, I don't know how many iPhones are currently being used, but let's say 50 million. All right, I know that 300 million have been sold, so let's say 50 million are currently being used. If you were Apple, would you want a database of where everybody is in the news app, plus everywhere they've been and everywhere that you would recommend them going? If you were Apple, would you want to store that information for every single iPhone? $50 million users? I don't think so. That's too much. It's too much information. So what do? There's not a whole lot of value there, is there? Am I bummed that I can't go back and read an article that I just read? No. So if you're Apple and you're developing a news app, you push all of that information to the app itself, right? You try to put it on the app itself. Yeah, Brendan, I quit playing Overwatch, even though I only played it like 5 times. It's like it's pretty clear that it got in there. Raid Shadow Legends, kind of. I've seen ads for it, but I haven't played it. It pushes all that information to the app itself. But let's think about it the other way for video games. You can think of things like GTA 5, you can think of things like Fortnite, whatever it is. How important is it that every action taken is synchronized with the server? Extremely. Y'all don't even know. My 10-year-old kid, he saves up his chore money, spends $20 to get a Mandalorian skin. When he gets back home, he better be playing as the Mandalorian. It needs it to be there, all right? He needs it to be there. He's spent a lot of his resources there. We have a lot of decisions that we need to make about that, all right? So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about sessions. And more specifically, we're talking about a concept of end sessions, which are stateful or stateless sessions. Now, all of this only matters when it came to these sort of long transactions. Now, once we started thinking about longer transactions, we started re-examining what it meant to have a client state. So let's go back to 285, because really, what is this class all about? It's about maturation and growth and thinking about higher topics. Let's think about 285. In 285, one of the first things you do is you learn sessions or logins, right? We're going to do login. Now, a lot of times we use like Google API to handle it for us, it's all good. But I have a question, why sessions? Why logins? What is the purpose of that login?
They can use it to they can be logged in for X amount of time. They hit certain action, they no longer have access to that account.
Everything Kevin just said, we're going to go. Verifying file integrity, sorry. Yeah, Justin, absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't catch it right as you were saying it. Very, very good. Look, Kevin just hit the two big ones, all right? When we think about it, really, one of the biggest things that we talk about with sessions, when we think about it from the standpoint of something, of course, like 285, sessions become two key components. But the first and most important is about authentication. This is who they say they are, and it's identification and authentication. Now, the other part of the answer is dead on. That becomes about data and access. And that's what we kind of tie into it. What data is associated with it? What access do we provide for them? I'll be honest with you, I'm super lazy now, especially when I'm working out with AWS, working with AWS. I'm also lazy when I work out, but that's for another reason. But when I'm working in AWS, I use IAM, and it's always about this access. It's like I've stopped thinking about functionality, and I'm thinking about security way dang too much, all right? So this is the thought process behind it. We know who this person is. We verify who this person is through their client. And now we have data that's associated. We have access that's associated with it. And that's the purpose of these sessions. But the thing about it is this data can be super long-term or it can be super short-term data. In the case of the video game, the resources that I've collected, the characters that I've built, have been there for years. Super long-term data, super long-term, super important data. But there's also like some very short-term data about my activities. Whether I'm currently in a battle, what the state of the battle is. See, that short-term stuff becomes a little bit less obvious. What's going on? I'm sorry, is that buzz bothering you out here? All right, y'all let me know in the chat if you've unmuted. I may not be able to hear you right at first. I'll turn you up whenever you're unmuted. So this is what we're talking about, short-term data, all right? Why do we care about it? Because in enterprise systems, we're looking at the development of these things from a practical standpoint. And we see these sessions, oddly enough, as objects. Something like this. Class circle. We know this is a class, and when we create objects, we fill in the member variables, like int radius, and point, center. When we talk about stateful versus stateless in enterprise systems, here's the importance of it. It's super challenging. Because imagine an object that has no state, aka no member variable. It seems almost pointless, right? It seems scary. It seems hard to implement. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is what does it mean to have this state, all right? So let's look at some very real examples, all right? Let's look at registering for classes in our favorite enterprise system. And let's think about what aspects are stateful and what aspects are stateless, okay? Now, what's a given on this is that we create our session in LeoNet by logging in. We log in and we're good. From that point on, we've started a session. So, and somebody at home probably has it better for this. We open up LeoNet and we want to register for classes. I want y'all to register for 455, video game programming, all right? The first thing that you do, what is it? What's the first link that you click? I couldn't hear you.
My client.
Client? Oh, is there a LeoNet client? Oh no, I didn't even know that.
First thing I click is Leo doesn't have the thing where it's like, doesn't put you on the student home page anymore, so you got to actually listen to your click it. But, yeah, you got to click it, and then you go to something.
Gotcha. All right, so there we go. We navigate. We start to navigate. Now, what's funny is Justin's and Lorenzo's and Kevin's are all different initial aspects, but everybody does end up in the same place. There's this link called self-service. Once we click that link, we have a big dashboard of stuff. Y'all remember where we go to from there? We look for what it is. I think it's called, like, there's an enrollment box, and inside of the enrollment box, you can do something like add classes or something like that. All right. Yes, absolutely. I think Justin may be following along with this, so we're going to count on you a little bit, Justin. All right, so Justin, when you're in add classes, click it for me. I want you to tell me what the process is to find and at least get to the shopping cart for CMPS 455, if you're not enrolled in 455 already. Yeah, I think it's search for class. Then it brings up a list of results. You find CMPS 455, and it has a window that says, yeah, bad form that really isn't horrible. It's only going to exist for another year, and then we'll have a new bad form that's really horrible. All right, and there's like a button that says cancel or next or something like that, right? And you hit the button next, and it adds it to shopping cart. Then you have to click on shopping cart. Thank you. And then do enroll. All right. Now, what's the point of this exercise? Then hit enroll 3 times, it might work. All right, very good. Oh, yeah, and that's going to be the biggest things that we talk about in a minute. All right. So the point of this entire stretch, from here, from here, when we click self-service, all the way down to enroll, I want you to think about something. Does the server care where the client is? If you're on LeoNet and you click self-service, does the server need to know that Lorenzo Bassi has clicked self-service? Beyond giving you what links are next, no, it doesn't need to store that state. Because if you had logged on and clicked self-service, and then you're like, okay, I gotta go, and log off and come back, you don't expect it to be right there where the page you were at, right? It would be nice. It would be nice, but doesn't. No, absolutely. That is a really good response. I want you to know that. It would be a really good, that's a really good response. It would be nice. But for right now, the server doesn't care. It does need to know that you've clicked self-service, but only in the form of a single request. It needs to know I've clicked, well then let me return that to you. Done. The server doesn't care anymore. The next thing you're going to do is going to be a new request, and that's how it's going to be by request by request. So you get to the Add Classes button, and you've got your link that says, and it shows up a search form. Does the server need to keep you there? Does it need to store that you were there? Nope. What about once you search for the classes? You see a result and you hit next. It doesn't care about any of this. But what about this? Once you add it to a shopping cart, do you expect that shopping cart to persist? Yes. At this point, something happens. Wow, my marker's out. We're good to the red marker. You're only slightly better to me, red marker. All right. At this point, something changes. This long transaction was a stateless transaction. The server didn't keep track of where you were. The server didn't keep track of your progress until one magical thing happened. You added it to the shopping cart. There's only other part is enrolling. These are the points where a stateless transaction becomes a stateful transaction. So now we're going to get to the comment that Kevin really gave us a heads up on. I'm giving you a 5-minute break, which I'm going to sit here and stare at you. But I want you to think about something. If I gave you an assignment today that I want you to build a website that includes a shopping cart, I want you to very purposefully think, like actively think, how would I implement such a shopping cart? Standard e-commerce, but you want a shopping cart. Think like Amazon. I'm looking for geeky posters from my office. I was on my computer upstairs, and I was trying to find the right Attack on Titan poster. I added it in, and even though I did it on my computer, there it is in the app. All right? Think about a shopping cart like that. And I want you to think about, how am I going to implement a shopping cart? I'm going to show up, and I want you to actively think. Not just check your email, not just to think about it for a solid 5 minutes about the technical issues and the technical possibilities of implementing a shopping cart. This morning, I will be asking questions, and I'm going to rely on the people at home to answer them just as much as the people in the class. So be ready.
Question.
Hit me.
Does our market, e-store have more customers or more products?
Probably more products.
Because otherwise, you could primary key of database would be actually the product and have a number of users that have it in their cart that is grows instead of the opposite.
All right, here's the thing that I want you to think about. For the last 30 seconds of this. Where will you store the information that you want to have associated with that cart? Where do you want to store that information? All right, so let's talk about it. If I were to ask you to build out this exact or any kind of shopping cart, I think our first question, our first, half page of notes here. I think our first gut reaction, well, I need to store it, I need to store it, I need to store it. Where are you going to store the information about the shopping cart? Hit me, Megan. Yeah, probably in the cloud inside of something like a database, right? The location of it, by the way, outstanding that you brought up the cloud. That is good. You definitely don't want to start thinking about this as a single point of resource, right? That's what everybody thinks. It's a good answer. Good answer. Everybody wants to build a database with a shopping cart. Is there anywhere else that we could store it? Good. No, that's still going to be on the server. But I'm going to ask you a question here that's going to be a little bit thought-provoking, I hope. Can we store it? Oh, Greg, yeah, probably you do want to. Oh, Anish gave us a very good example in a state tree. Yeah, that's awesome, Anish, a good example. Now, Justin set up something here. Is there a place that we can store it on the client?
Yes.
Yes.
So there is, I've built up shopping cart. Anyway, so there's a way that as the user logs in, you can actually keep track of state management.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because you have to make sure state retained, right? So if somebody hits the over button on an item, you have to update your little shopping cart to have a little red notification, hey, you got one thing in it.
Mm-hmm.
Then that state has to retain from there all the way to the next page to be able to see all the items that, because you know, when you go to shopping cart, they can view it all. You don't store all that information in the server, because then you make a whole bunch of requests back and forth. Just a little log down the website.
Absolutely.
Stored at state is stored on the client side. You can tie it to when the user is logged in, so that way it stays there every time they're logged in.
Yes.
It doesn't go away.
Absolutely. Very, very good. Now what we talked about is that what Kevin was talking about is he uses the state manager, which is this really external component as a way to save it on the client side. Y'all, this actually is valid. Now, two people I saw now in for this local storage, and this the one that gets me is the easiest way is I don't know if I can do it in my voice.
See, it's for cookies. It's good enough for me.
All right. So when you go to cookie, it's the easiest way. Right. It's the easiest way, and the reason why is it's like so integrated into a browser. It's so easy to method, and you can just store variables in there. Right. You can absolutely store variables in there. Mm-hmm.
Object, or is it generic for JSON, XML, whatever?
It has its own format that is stored by the browser and accessed through the browser. So it will come back and you can pull it using those calls. Now from there, yeah, put it in a JSON object.
When you log into the website, you log in storage. When you log in again, the same cookies still there, storing your information.
Well, I know what it does, I know what it's stored as.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, in addition to that, somebody put local storage. Yes, they put all this stuff. There's lots of other things here that can be included. All right. So like rich clients, local storage. There's like y'all, this is horrible. This is the way we used to do it, but some people still do it in some cases. Do y'all ever use hidden form fields? Good. all right? But it is technically an option, all right, to hide the form field that's like, so you hit next on a form and it sends all of that information to the next page, and there's a form there, and there's a hidden form field there that takes in what from the previous page. How we used to do it, probably not the best way. What's that?
Sounds
Yeah, it's not the best way. There's a lot of reasons for it, but there are these options. Now, something that Scott mentioned and Justin mentioned and also is that really in reality we've got somewhere between these two. Okay, that both of these are very critical. But let's think about the two implementations. What do we get out of using a database? What's the biggest benefit of using a database to store our shopping cart? Always there. And the magic word for this is persistence. I don't know if it's an A or an E, so I kind of wrote a message so we won't know. All right? Persistence. It's across all of our devices. It's going to be there. If we log off, it's there. That's the big benefit. All right? But here's the thing. Is there any benefit at all? Is there any scenario where cookies are the better approach? Mama don't like you. She likes everyone. Remember Justin Bieber tickets? That was way better than I could have said it. Kevin said, if it doesn't matter after the length of the transaction, who cares? Absolutely. See, in the Justin Bieber concert, I selected very specific tickets, and it only kept my shopping cart for the length of that transaction. After that, tough noogies, right? It's gone. It's gone. Now, if I were asking, okay, well, fine, you don't need the database. What's the benefit of doing that on the client side? Faster. I like this word. And I don't know, I don't think anybody put in the chat yet. Cheaper, I actually like using this word. It doesn't, I know it means something different to me than most people. It's like we think immediate money, but with resources, right? It pushes all that stuff to the client. The server doesn't have to worry about it. You know, I'm getting old, but let's have to worry about stuff. Look, I'm wearing a cardigan today. I don't care. I just stopped worrying about stuff, right? And it makes your life easier. From a development standpoint, the less you have to worry about, the more your life is easy.
The marketing department will have some words.
What's that?
The marketing department will have some words with you.
Exactly, yeah.
And all those items that are on your phone, they want them to
Absolutely.
remember why.
And that's why that permanence of this may be better, especially if we were talking about Amazon. Amazon would never ever do this. But Justin Bieber tickets makes sense, right? So oddly enough, if there's no value in persistence, why spend the resources on it? Now with this example, I'm showing you something that ends up being an illustration. One of these is stateful server implementations, and one of them is stateless server implementations. This one is stateful. Very good. This is an example of what we use stateful sessions for. This one, obviously the other, stateless. Now, as we move each one of these, this is something that we always have to consider, that we always have to be thinking about. It's something that should always be in our brain, especially in enterprise systems where we have to think, at this point, I need to have a stateful knowledge of where this client got to. In other words, if you're using a state manager, it's like sync here, sync here. We've made a change that needs to be synchronized and recorded, all right? So I have some challenges for you just from the thought process side, all right? Man, I'm so bad at like keeping the notes. I'm really, really bad at this. All right. Here's my question. HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, the protocol for which we browse the web, Is this stateful or stateless? And it is okay to be completely wrong on this because I would be too. Is it stateful or stateless when you browse the web? Just browsing the web.
Let's say it's like,
Server side.
yeah, but these books are like tracked.
Say is browsing, not just saying request settings.
But each website keeps track of it, each things, so there's a lot of things, like, you always do a footprint. So there's always mistakes being left on the website.
I really hate it for the people at home if y'all couldn't hear that conversation. That's absolutely why it's a hard question to answer. We are conditioned with HTTP to see the long transaction that is our web history. All right. I was doing a proposal for Phase 125, and now my Facebook account, my private Facebook account, where I make ridiculous jokes and all this stuff, right? Share memes, is covered with ads for servers and storage arrays, which I could never afford for my personal account, and things that I don't understand, right? This is Ray DeJean and Matt McNulty and Paula Regis stuff outside of my area, and now it's flooding with it. And that doesn't even freak me out a little bit. I didn't even search for it. I just copied a link they sent to my email into a document, and then my Facebook changed, right? We're comfortable with that. I flew to Houston a while back, and on the way down there, it switched and it was showing me things for Uber. It was showing me things for this Mexican restaurant that my sister loves. It was literally advertising for me to visit my sister who lives in Houston because I got on a plane. I don't know how it knew, but we're comfortable with that, aren't we? Well, maybe we're not super comfortable, but we're used to it. Right?
Describe at the beginning of all these stuff on your advertisements to you, that's why.
Yeah, it's what we're used to. We're used to this sort of tracking, but there's a lot of tracking around that. HTTP on its own, though. See, this is like target ads, that's pushed off. The challenge of it is let's consider how much control the client has when we're just navigating the web. I go to website A. I hit an Apache server, I send a request in, it sends a response back. I send a request in, I get a response back. Request in, response back. Request in, response back. When all of that information stays on the request, that's the big hint. This means it's stateless. And that is why it's such a good conversation. Seriously, y'all's conversation about statefulness was outstanding because it's really discussing, well, where is the state being held? When we shifted down to requests, like Kevin was talking about, that means we shifted the responsibility of the statefulness to the client, which means that it becomes stateless. So that was a really outstanding discussion to get there, all right? Things like HTTP are stateless. So I'm going to give some examples here, and let's see where we might be, all right? Let's do an example like this. If I have a website that's an online auction, and I have users that come in, hit refresh, keep up with their bid history, all this stuff. Or maybe like a poker game, right? Where it's just they're coming in and they're deciding their hands, they get all this stuff. And what frequently happens over the course of this transaction is that clients are very, very likely to cancel out their transactions. That's a session, I'm sorry. Transaction. Clients are very likely to cancel transactions. And by cancel transactions, I mean turn off the computer. Hit X on the web page or go to a different URL. If you were developing a website and it very, very frequently canceled out, that you had users that were constantly moving in and moving out, would you make this a stateful implementation where you store information about their sessions persistently on a database? Or would you make it a stateless implementation where you just let them handle it?
Like you said, you're going to have weird amounts of transactions, right?
Mhm.
So all these transactions are going to be mostly probably not done because it's a bunch of tracking. So if you're going to have a bunch of transactions that are going to be done, while the transactions are happening, they should be stateless. Now, after the transaction happens, it turns into stateful. But while you're doing this long transaction, you shouldn't be tracking things that need to be unmarked in the database.
That's everything. The response comes down to what sections have to be persistent or not. Now Kevin was answering, well, this could be valuable to be hung around. Absolutely. There are aspects of it that we want persistence, but for the transaction itself, we can move it to the client because, the persistence becomes a bad thing. How long do we hold this information? How long do we keep that state in the transaction? Because it's taking up resources. Lindsay, you had a point?
Well, I was just playing devil's advocate, like counter everything. Say, you want to cancel. You have customers that were always referring to say you have to train, buying tickets online for like trains and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to keep it on a database so that if they close their session and you can reopen it all of a sudden they're not going to miss their training customers.
And what's most important is that your eyes are on the right prize. Because your eyes are like, is there any value in the persistence in that example?
There is value.
And
We'll say from a business standpoint, people are just trying to get sales out, sometimes holding the sale, even if it is just holding the sale, it's like, yes, it is good that they're valuing their customer for trying to hold the sale, but somebody holding cancel is kind of lost. I believe that. It's kind of that first one versus third time. In those type of situations, sometimes some websites do cater to more last name.
Yeah.
It's like, most people from a business standpoint just kind of want to get their sales out, so it's like, the transaction is good to me up to the point where you hit the button and I make a mistake. You did actually have a value to purchase the book.
But you're counting only the moment of purchase. I'm talking about carrying your state.
So the example was,
like an auction site. I think I said like an auction site where it's just constantly looking, or a poker game or something.
or a poker game. So, for the auction site, people are continuing to bid. Like placing bids on this, we're going to assume that there's more than one person that needs to be in a stateless position because they're all going to be making bids.
Bids are stateful.
Bids are stable, you need to track them. Because that needs to be consistent, this needs to be consistent. Poker might be different, but this needs to be consistent. You need to be able to keep track and make what bid.
Right.
Poker probably different.
Megan, you have a point to make?
I was just gonna say that, some people might want to, make it like their shopping cart stateless, so that way if somebody goes in, they're more likely to buy something that's not going to be saved in their cart. Because they're like, oh, my aunt is going to buy something like that. Otherwise, I think if they have a shopping cart for a while, they might, think about it and say, no, I don't really want this.
And that's all the right questions to be asking because it really comes down to persistence for them. Is it worth keeping? Now, you do need to understand that there's a lot of cost associated with it. All right? that savings, okay? So we take something very small, like Leo did, right? Now here's the thing, if I look at the core data for the users here at Southeastern, if I were to dump it all into one single database table, 1.7 terabytes is what I calculated on the way to school this morning. 1.7. A database that's 1.7 terabytes, unusable. Unusable. You need to split, normalize, optimize, whatever it is that you got to do. But that's not okay. All right. There's a huge cost associated, but we have to think about when it makes sense to spend that cost. So I'm going to give another example. This one hits me. What about when the server crashes? And this isn't so theoretical. So when I was at Louisiana Tech, we weren't given like scheduling appointments in the sense that like, oh, you can register after this date. We got 10-minute windows. And you had to register within those 10-minute windows. Like, it was a race. You had to be in these particular computer labs to do it. The reason why is because their enterprise system called BOSS, Bulldog something scheduling system, online scheduling system, would crash if more than, say, 200 people are using it, right? So what about the situation where you have, like, orientations here, where there will be 300 or 400 students that come in. They'll all go to different computer labs, and they'll start registering for classes at the same time. You're developing a shopping cart. You're developing a transaction system. You're developing all this stuff. For a system where the server keeps on crashing, the server seems unreliable. Ugh. This might be a trick question. Transactions, if they're long transactions, but the server goes down, where do you want the session information stored at? Where do you want the state to be stored in that situation? This is a trick question.
My answer is
on the server. That is the correct answer. You want it to maintain, what's that? Yeah, you got to put it back. Now, even though the server is there, you still want it to go back to the last place it was before. So yeah, and it's weird because even when you're talking about that, but that's an issue that we have to talk about with scalability, because users get very, very pissed off. I've seen it with our students, right? They'll spend 15, 20 minutes building up a shopping cart, and then they hit enroll and it fails, or they lose network or something like that. They get very, very upset. So in cases like this, we look at persistence, and we see the value in that persistence. There's a lot of times where we have to look at these criteria to work through it. Y'all, I've forgotten something, because I finished it 15 minutes early, and I ran late in the first class. No, I think we did it. I think that's everything. So I'm sorry, I ran fast on y'all's class, and I went slow on the first class. So I am going to go ahead and call it, but this is what the next level thinking of these systems are. We think of when does persistence start to matter? And we try to push as much as we can to the client side. I never want you to think about sessions and logins as like, it's so that we can use user authentication and identification. That is one small portion of it. We also frequently have to consider the state of the client that is interacting with our system. When we can, we want to push that to the client, because if we store it all on the server, it becomes super big, super fast, at the cost of scalability. And that's kind of the point of today's lecture. So I hope that was pretty clear. I want to say like a super big thanks. I know the chat kind of died down about 20 minutes ago, but but the conversation makes that lecture so much better. So I appreciate everybody for chiming in. That really does make it so much better. There is a small assignment, and it is in the Lanyap tab of Moodle because there's no ethics, and you just type it in, 15 minutes max. All right, it's just a journal entry. All right, so it is in there, but it's on the Lanyap tab. What's up? Yes, 3 paragraphs. It wasn't up yesterday. I put it in last night. So it is, but it's on the Lanyap tab. Just want to make sure everybody knows. Oh, like next week, Monday or Tuesday, I think.
It's not there yet on my side, but.
Well, you know what? Let me double check it just to make sure. Well, I'll do that right after this. I'll make sure that it is up. I might have just done it for the first class and not hit visible on this one. When I do one right after the other, I frequently make mistakes. All right, thank you, everybody. Y'all have a good weekend. Enjoy. Let me know if you have any problems or have any requests about the little project that's going on. Lots of people ask, hey, I've never used Vue before. Can I do that? Yep. I've never done this before. Can I use that? Yep. So if you have any of those requests or something, just let me know. More than willing to work. Everybody have a good weekend. I don't know.
So, that's a generic question. What if database has 200 users?
Mm-hmm.